Welcome to Rather Have the Story. Special guest today, special guest anytime, is this cool guy we've invited in for so many good reasons, but cool guy is enough. Matthew Fink, let's call him with the full name today, also known as Dr. Fink of the Revolution, and has many more things we're going to talk about today to get into your life, maybe find out a bit more.
Okay.
Shall we?
Sure.
I want to talk about home first.
Okay.
Minneapolis. You're here in LA for a little brief visit.
Yes.
Your son Max is here.
Yeah.
You're visiting him as well.
Yeah.
Is there like a style of person that is Minneapolis style? Like we know what New York means in LA.
Well, you know what they say about Minnesota? They say, people from Minnesota are very nice, they're polite, and they call it Minnesota nice.
Yeah.
So there is some truth to that, definitely.
And in the city, does it change a bit, or?
No, but things have changed a bit over the years. Things have gotten more crowded, more people coming in, then some of that niceness wears off a little because those people are not from Minnesota, they're not native. So we have a few people that are not as nice. Like they won't let you in on the freeway as easily as they used to back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That might be true everywhere.
It happens everywhere. But no, I don't know if that's I think it's true for the most part.
I like to talk to people about LA. They think of Hollywood and Tinseltown, and there's certainly a fraction of it that is that showbiz aspect, but so much of the business is people working hard, people doing stuff behind the scenes or support teams. So I find it more of a creative town than people from the outside might. But Minneapolis has such a music integrity, or it's just famous for it. I mean, really one of the most important things.
Yes, and there's also a very vibrant theater scene in the Twin Cities. A lot of...
Like live theater?
Lots of live theater, yeah. And there's some comedy groups, kind of like Second City. There was one called the Dudley Riggs Brave New Workshop. It's still going, which has been around since also the late 60s. And a lot of people have come out of there as well, kind of like Second City and some of the other ones.
And we know the music scene goes way before the time period when the rest of the country knew about it. Was there anything really cool and happening when you grew up that was like Minneapolis special, like interesting bands that never made it out?
Oh, yeah, sure. There was a group called Cain, spelled with a C, C-A-I-N, and they were the biggest group in the Twin Cities back in the late 60s, early 70s. I really looked up to them, and they did original music and everything. And they were about to go national, probably, and blow up really big. And they put an album out called A Pound of Flesh. And the album cover was entrails from something. I don't know what it was.
Ouch.
And they put it on the cover, and it just completely,
wow,
messed with their career at that point. It was like wholeheartedly big turnoff, rejected by the general public. Some people probably got it, but I remember it hurt them a great deal.
Were you a Billy Joel fan?
Absolutely.
Do you know about his band called Attila before Billy Joel?
Boy, it rings a bell.
He and a guy named Jonathan Smallwood. It was just organ and drums. So it was like a Lee Michaels kind of thing. But they are pictured on the cover of the Attila album. You've got to look it up. Roman centurion outfits surrounded by slabs of meat.
Oh, sure.
And that is their record cover. It's like, wow. But that's Billy Joel, William Joel.
And of course, the Beatles did that one ill-fated Butcher cover.
Yeah.
But and then there was this group that did gain some fame. The ones that did the Trashmen, who did "Bird Is the Word." That
classic.
Was a Minneapolis classic.
One of the best records ever made. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's this other group called the Del Counts, which were inducted into the Rock and Roll Minnesota Rock and Roll Hall of Fame several years ago, and they just had their 60th anniversary show recently.
They sound like kind of a soul vocal group?
Yeah, like R&B and pop and stuff. And they did a lot of originals, but they did tons of covers. Even when they do their albums, they'd throw covers on there and everything. But they never quite made national recognition stature, but they're huge in the Midwest, still to this day.
It's fun at every city.
And they played at our wedding. We hired them to play at our wedding, yeah. We
got to say hi to Andra's here, family affair here in the Peanut Gallery today.
Yeah,
it's good. And you and I are keyboard nerds, if you want to call it that, if people grew up with a focus on keyboards. But in the 70s era, Elton John, Billy Joel, Keith Emerson, Rick Wakeman, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, et cetera, there's keyboards as the main thing in a lot of groups. I mean, it's the lead instrument. It's the focal point.
Yeah, and all of those artists were huge influences on me growing up, the ones you mentioned.
And that sort of seems like it's a middle ground between the strict classical performance technique, traditional, and then the jazz, which is also a tradition, but an improv tradition. But we're talking pop, people that know how to play chord progressions, people that know how to keep it simple when you can actually play more. Which is the whole element of what you do and what I do, that kind of thing.
But with that said, my teacher, this gentleman by the name of Tom Weekland, I'll give him a shout out, great guy.
Good.
He's still with us, and I reconnected with him recently, by the way. But he kept me studying classical at the same time because he felt it was important. So I was always working on a classical piece while I was working on the jazz work.
It seems like you have chops we've never seen then. I mean, most of us know you from pop music, strictly.
Yeah, but Prince, he brought that jazz influence in later on, when he did the Madhouse album, and I was able to play on some of that. And
you worked with Prince?
Oh my God. We forgot to mention that. Oh my God. Okay, so anyway, that was a great time.
Comes in useful at some point.
And then after like once I was brought in to work with Prince, there was another gentleman who I worked with for a little while, for about a year or so, another jazz teacher in Minneapolis by the name of Bobby Peterson. Just an amazing jazz player. And I had some instruction from him as well.
I think also it's, especially for soloing, which is something you're known for, it's like jazz improv is the core of that, whether you're soloing in a jazz style or not, but you are literally improvising and you're listening to what's going around you and responding to the chord progressions and taking it somewhere you can take it. So there's a high function there, whether it's applied in a pure jazz form or not, of course.
Yeah, and I don't profess to be a jazz person in that genre per se. I mean, I never really went headlong into that genre as a player. But learning the scales and the chordal progressions and working with Prince in that capacity, because his father was more of a jazz musician. We both had some of that background, and it helped with the pop side of things.
So you started with just piano. Most people did. That was their family instrument. And then did it progress to electric keyboards soon after that? Or what did you do after that?
Well, yes. I'd say by around, like I said, I started when I was 7. So by the time I was about 8 even, a friend of mine, the drummer in my first group, he lived down the block and he didn't even have a drum set yet. They just had a little piano in his basement. So I'd go over there and we'd just noodle around on the piano. And then he I think long about the time he was about 10, he got a drum kit. And then we started jamming in his basement. And then by the time we were 12, we put together a band of people, in the neighborhood. So I ended up with my brother's Farfisa organ at that time, because he was in a band all the way up through 9th grade. But then he had an issue with the band and he walked away from it and never went back to playing in a band after that. He decided he didn't want it. It wasn't for him. So he just said, you can have the organ, go ahead, you're messing around with that. And I said, okay. So I had this little Farfisa Fast 3 is what it was called.
That's a VIP, one of those organs?
Well, I had a VIP later.
Okay.
But this was they call it a Fast, F-A-S-T 3.
FAST is one of their designs, It
was like 4, maybe 5 octave keyboard, maybe that big, and it like packed up in a suitcase and the legs folded, and it had green plastic sides. It was really funny looking. But it was great, and all the lettering was green on it.
They look kind of like a European hot rod.
Exactly.
Sort of,
yeah.
It's the Italian Farfisa thing. And yet, to me, it was like to step beyond an acoustic instrument and have electric sounds. You lose a bit, like the touch control that's so beautiful on a piano. It's nailed on a piano, but then you've got very plasticky keys and something very stiff, but you got those cool sounds coming suddenly.
Yeah. So I'm in 7th grade at this point, and we did our first gig for some girl's bat mitzvah when I was just almost quite 13. And then from there, it took a few more years. Like by the time I was about 10th grade time, that's when I got my first Fender Rhodes piano. And then the Farfisa VIP 345 came in because I went to my parents. I said, I can't buy this stuff. Will you guys help me get this? And they went, sure. You know, we'll help you get it. And then by the time I was in 11th grade or so, I got my first synthesizer, which I bought used, which was a mini Korg.
Oh, yeah.
One of those early mini Korgs. And then the Mini Moog came in by my senior year of high school because I was playing a lot. I was starting to make money. And I went and purchased one at that point.
And at that point, it looks like that's 4 keyboards you're carrying around.
3 at that time.
Okay.
And then right after the Mini Moog I purchased a kind of a cheap string synthesizer. It was like an Elka is what it was called.
Sure. Yeah.
And then from there I moved on to the Freeman string machine is what it was called.
Like English, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was kind of different sounding, you know.
It's actually very rare over here.
Very rare.
Very unusual. Pink Floyd had them. I
Yep.
think a few people did, but not many.
Yeah. And then, you know, from there...
Do you remember, though? I remember going to stores and looking at keyboards or trying them and going, oh, man, I wish I could buy that. Guitar players did it with guitars, drummers with drums, I'm sure. But, you know, to even play a synthesizer and get those weird sounds was like the future. It sounded like space, and it sounded like way beyond a Fender Rhodes, way beyond an organ.
Absolutely. And the one album that influenced me in the beginning stages of that when I was, you know, 12, 13 years old was the album Switched on Bach, you know, by Wendy Carlos. Yeah. And that was a huge influence on me. And then, of course, I'll never forget when she did the soundtrack for Clockwork Orange. So when I was about, I think I was 14, I was in 9th grade, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And Clockwork Orange came out, and it was rated X at that time. They hadn't put an R rating on it yet.
Yeah.
But there was like a day off for school. So we like went downtown and we had fake IDs. and we were in this crowded lobby, just wall-to-wall people, all seniors who were old enough to get into this film, and we were just sandwiched in, and they didn't take time to check. They barely checked our ID, and they let us in, and we got in at that age of 14. So we were just like, oh my God, we got into Clockwork Orange.
That soundtrack, I mean, it dovetails with the story of the movie and the Beethoven themes and so forth. It is
Bach and Beethoven, yeah.
It's almost the perfect marriage of a soundtrack to a film in one of the few rare cases where it works. But I've listened to that record millions of times, obviously, and it's so well done.
Yeah,
really
very well done, and again, a big influence.
But again, yeah, those are sounds that are sort of vaguely familiar, but they're also not heard before.
Exactly.
At the time.
Yeah.
It's strange to think about how, like, I used to buy records because there was a synthesizer on them. It was weird to think that, you know, you couldn't really hear one very easily or very often. And I would see something, if I was choosing between 2 records, if that one had some kind of synthesizer, I'd be like, I want to buy that and hear those weird sounds of the future and of space.
Yeah, and of course, you know, Abbey Road had early Mini Moog stuff on there in '69, and then you had the Moog modular stuff, you know, that Keith Emerson was already using at that point, at time.
So good.
And Yes was already at that point doing things too.
And it, you know, crept into the jazz world. Once Miles Davis started going electric, everybody else also was in that wheelhouse of Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Jan Hammer, these amazing players. And like people like Jan Hammer that made soloing such a feature, synthesizer had caught up to guitar for once. It was just as interesting, just as expressive.
Yes, absolutely.
And I see that in your playing too, where it's like...
Well, Jan was a huge influence.
Oh, okay.
I listened to how he would, you know, pitch bend and do all his techniques. And
the 7 Days record he made is incredible. Yeah.
So I emulated that.
The first Prince video I saw you in, you have a different outfit on in those days. It's like a satin jacket.
Oh, do you mean when I had the gold satin kind of tails and tucks
It
outfit?
looks almost like a ringmaster in his beautiful satin,
lapels,
shiny.
Gold satin, shiny.
But it's not quite the look that we know you for yet.
Right,
It was a beginning thing for the whole band.
Yeah.
And at that point, there's a Mini Moog on top of the Rhodes. Looks like it could fall over. Because the Rhodes has a curved top.
Yes.
The Mini Moog, which we've got one sitting here, doesn't quite balance
But
on
we
that.
actually had some special leveler things that kind of went on top,
smart.
so it wasn't wobbly, but it was supported properly. I just had the Rhodes, the Mini.
String synth then?
We had an ARP, the ARP string machine at that point, and the Oberheim 4-voice,
Yeah.
the SEM module 4-voice.
Did you consider yourself a programming person? Did you pretty good at making sounds?
I was learning. You know, I was better on the, at that point, the Mini Moog, I was good at, you know, quickly programming in between songs because I was doing it in cover bands before Prince. So, as far as the Oberheim, yeah, that was a learning curve to be doing that on a 4-voice because each one of those modules you would have to
It's 4
program.
little synthesizers,
Yeah,
and each
4
one
little
is a
ones.
note on your keyboard when you're holding 4 notes down. Yeah.
Exactly.
People don't often know about how it didn't often come with an owner's manual. Sometimes, yeah, but people learn from copying patch sheets or diagrams of like, here's a good bass sound, put the knobs here. Here's a good trumpet sound, put the knobs here. And then you eventually start messing with them going, what happens if I turn the knobs and change the trumpet sound? And that's how I learned to program sounds, is by, you know, varying from those instruction sheets.
Yeah.
Or you made your own. I had to make notes about, oh, I like that sound. I better write it down because
Yeah.
there's no way to save it.
Well, actually, those early 4-voice modules, you had 11
Only on the
presets. That was
Oberheims,
it.
sure.
On those Oberheims were
Yeah.
the first ones, and then of course the Polymoog, which we had as well, had its own bank of
A couple buttons.
presets that were like already done.
Yeah.
But then you could tweak those. Yeah.
I think Liesl said that that was Prince's keyboard that he had originally. That was one of his keyboards that he used to record with, and very expensive at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
like $5,000 in 70s money.
Yeah.
It's like 20, 30 grand right now.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine buying anything that expensive. But it's fun to play with, and at that point, you've got a pretty big keyboard rig that you're hauling around. I hope you
Yeah.
had roadies.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big goal for a keyboard player or a drummer, is to have a roadie.
But not in the previous band. I mean, I had the organ, the Rhodes, the Mini, and the Freeman machine,
And some of
and
those
I was
weigh
hauling that.
75 pounds up
Yeah,
and down
they were
staircases
heavy.
in the snow.
And a Liesl
Wow.
speaker, and then I had 2 speaker cabinets, one on each side of the stage. So I had like a stereo rig.
Must sound great.
It did. It sounded really good.
But your back has probably suffered from that.
Oh,
Sure.
I did okay. I never really
Good.
got injured, but yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, other members of the band chipped in, you know.
And we were just talking about this satin outfit I saw, but then it changed to a different outfit that's still not the famous one. You have a convict look going with stripes,
A
right?
striped jail suit, yeah.
Is that your idea?
Yes.
Okay.
I fancied it because black and white stripes go well with black and white keyboards.
Oh, good.
And I thought, oh, that's kind of
I
a
never
nice
thought of that.
match,
Great.
you know. And I thought it harkened back a bit to the old jailhouse rock with Elvis look and that whole thing. I was kind of, and I thought because we were more new wavy, edgy, you know, and I was just kind of bringing back.
Plus, it
differently.
projects on stage. I mean, it's got a look.
Yeah,
It's
and it's
definitely
got a
something
look.
you can see, for sure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the Village People. It's not like everybody in the band is dressing as a character yet. So
Yeah.
it's your creation.
Yeah. Prince requested quirkiness for my look. He just said, "I want you to be the quirky guy that's going to appeal to quirky people." You know.
Sometimes keyboard players get
Yeah.
they get the mad scientist label,
Exactly.
which kind of works. Not so
Exactly.
much for drummers, but good for
Right.
keyboard guys.
Yeah, and so he liked that look, and then our first.
I think that's on the American Bandstand
Yeah.
period, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The first television appearance on American Bandstand, and then we did the Midnight Special as well, right at that same time, and I wore it on there too.
Did you say somebody's found that actual outfit?
Yes, somebody recently found the one that was made by one of our seamstresses, made a custom one for me. But before that, I had purchased just a cotton one from a costume shop. And then she made one, and then it didn't last very long on that, because we were touring with Rick James as an opening act.
The
This
infamous
was
tour.
in late 79 into 80. And so 3 shows into the tour, Rick James, he's wearing this big wide striped black and white jail suit on the song called Bustin' Out of L7.
All right.
And Prince comes to me and he says, you know, Rick's wearing a jail suit and he's the headliner. I think you have to change your image. I go, but he's only wearing it on one song. He goes, that's too bad. Nope.
Don't want to be
We can't do it.
compared.
I said, okay. He goes, what was your other choices when you were devising your look? And I said, well, I thought of a guy dressed in a doctor's scrub suit, but I thought it was too plain, because it's kind of a powder blue look and V-neck, and I thought, it's kind of boring. So I didn't go with it. He says, well, what if we, doctored it up and got a stethoscope and a mask and a surgeon's look and make you look like a doctor? And I went, I don't know. I mean, it's different, and he says, let's try it. We'll send the wardrobe gal out. We were in Chicago at the time. She went out to a uniform shop and brought it all back. And I went, okay. So he said, now I want you to put the mask on and wear it when you come out on the stage. So they won't know who you are. And I was already wearing the wraparound sunglasses. Yeah. So that's how that came to be. And so as soon as I'm on stage, people are like, what's this guy? Pointing at me and stuff, Hey, who's the mystery dude, the doctor, So that it was a kind of a fun thing.
I like the fact that also he's allowing you to be creative, but also, pushing for something more. Like, let's not be boring, let's not be dull.
Exactly.
But allowing you some freedom to do what you need to do as well, which is kind of not expected.
And, it's kind of taking a cue in a way from the band Kiss a little bit, to have these characters and other groups that did that,
Yeah. These were blue scrubs, right? The traditional doctors.
Traditional, yeah.
Good. But at some point you decided to get creative and found some other options, right?
Yeah. In the early stages, I came in with the colors of the rainbow doctor suits. Each one is the yellow, green, purple, blue,
peach, whatever.
Everything.
Yeah.
And so this was right before the Dirty Mind tour, and he just said, no, you have to be authentic. I only want you in the authentic scrubs. So
you got to play a real doctor on stage.
Yeah.
That's good. There's something about the doctor image also too. The way you perform and the way you are is like punctuation to the music. It's out there and it's projecting and it's strong. It's not just a typical keyboard nerd who hides behind their keyboards. Most keyboard players, including Elton John, most of the time sit down and play. Never. I've not seen you with a chair and a stool behind the thing. It's always up and at 'em.
Yep, standing and dancing.
Yeah, that whole band was moving for sure.
Oh yeah, Prince had us, moving in sync on songs and everybody in the band. And
sounds like a lot of rehearsal.
Yeah, there was, but
worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving on with keyboards, you started with this big pile of things, and I think it really stripped down over time.
Yeah, over time it kept getting more and more stripped down.
And yet there are always two keyboard players.
Yes.
So that's an interesting idea to even have one in a band. It sometimes was unusual or like icing on the cake, but was it maybe, do you think because of the way he did his records?
Yeah, it's the way he did his records. You really had to have four hands going a lot. Not always. Sometimes you'd have three parts layered, so I'd have two and the other person would have one and two hands if fattening it up, or vice versa. It just depended how we divvied up parts between the other keyboardist and myself.
The sounds of that time period, 1980, 1982, 87, sounds retro, but it is modern for the time.
Yeah, for the time it was new and innovative.
And
definitely.
So now we consider it classic rock or even like cool old school.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen people are making sound sets and samplers and reissues of the old instruments now because they want exactly those sounds that you guys used to play.
Yeah, in fact, I consulted on a whole Prince bank that's coming out from Arturia.
Cool.
For Oberheim stuff. And they recreated sounds from a whole bunch of songs from that era, from the 80s.
A challenge, too, in that he's often recording by himself, and you are given the finished tape, right? Or a mix of it, things to learn from?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got it reinterpreted.
Unless I played on it, obviously.
Yeah, true.
But
in fact, speaking of which, the song Head has one of those great solos on it that's like really crazy. And it's one of your stylistic things where it starts off and it gets more intense and the modulation gets wild and weird. And I love the fact that your personality gets injected into something like that.
Yeah, no, I was very fortunate that he did that. He brought us in as a group, because he obviously could play everything.
Sure.
And he didn't really need us in the studio, but he liked having that flavor, that extra quality coming from other people around him.
But you and the others all had technique that is unique to each person.
Yes, exactly. That was the other reason why, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just I can't play that, but it's the note choices and the way you play that is interesting. And on songs like that, anyway, through the whole live period, a keyboard solo is kind of a time when, okay, the song's done its verse, it's done its chorus, now it's going to take off. We're going to go like double speed, and the keyboard solo makes it get intense and crazy on the top. And I love that function of it. It's like now's when the song blows up and everybody goes crazy. You know, it really is that kind of moment, like icing on the top.
Yeah.
Again, must have been very fun, and also, I'm sure at times a little bit intimidating to be in a band where there's challenges like that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I love what they used to call in the old days integrated, black and white. The Chambers Brothers, Sly and the Family Stone, people that mixed together their groups, which was a challenge in the early days, especially. But then it became more of a thing. Obviously, Sly is the breakthrough with men and women and black and white mixed together. Huge success, and also did it well.
Yeah.
Like everybody fit. Everybody had their piece of the puzzle. And even throughout the time of having different keyboard players, and there's Lisa and Rosie and Gail and men and women mixed together in the group, I think is such a great thing.
And Bonnie, you forgot Bonnie.
Bonnie, of course, and Wendy comes in and plays guitar and things like that. The Sly influence is overt.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
He even acknowledged that. He also, you know, our label mates Fleetwood Mac, he also took a cue from them to have it, you know, have male and female in there. And
personally, like, was that music you were into as you grew up and things like that?
What with the
like Sly and
absolutely.
Yeah,
oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, you know, when Sly was in Woodstock and did Woodstock and all that, a big influence. You know, I mean, I loved the Woodstock movie and all the music that came out.
He's a Farfisa guy from way back
too. Oh yeah,
too.
he was a Farfisa guy, and yeah, that I love that. You know, that really. I thought, oh my gosh, he's got a Farfisa. Yeah.
And the difference from that sound, it's an organ from Italy that is not so big and not so heavy compared to the old wooden Hammond organs that sound more like church and the blues and maybe
it was
jazz.
Transistors. It was using it wasn't the old tone wheel style like a Hammond is, and whatever that was. It was a new technology.
And it's a little buzzier.
State.
It's a little more. It's leaning towards the synth a lot. Not quite a synthesizer capability, but certainly that. And then the first synthesizers like these guys back here are kind of one note at a time.
Right.
You had an Oberheim, which is kind of moving forward, or the Polymoog, a little bit of options there. But finally, it gets to the point where you can have one keyboard and kind of do a whole show.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't remember samplers coming in to the shows that much.
Well, they did eventually.
Yeah.
You know, right around just past the Purple Rain album is when he started using more and more sampling, like the Fairlight. He brought Fairlight in. The old Mirages.
Yeah, and Sonic.
And Sonic Mirage.
Yeah.
And then Akai's were used as well.
I was thinking about one of the songs live had a sequencer going. Was it I Would Die For You?
Yes.
And I remember hearing a jigga 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 jig, which is really hard to play if you're going to try to play it, right?
In the studio, the bass part to that song was played by Prince live, unsequenced.
On the keyboard.
Just perfect.
Wow.
When he had to do 16th notes, you know, just pulsing for the chord changes. And he wanted me to do that live, which I did for a while in rehearsal. I was doing it. I got it pretty tight. It can never be perfect because it's human. I don't know how Prince was impeccable with that kind of stuff, even more than myself. But I said to him, you know, if we could sequence this, I could be freed up to just play the chords and fatten them up with Lisa, and we could really layer that big. And he says, you know, that's a good idea. How can we do that? I said, I'll figure it out. At that time, that the memory Moog came in at that point. And the original memory Moogs did not have a sequencer, and then they developed the memory Moog Plus shortly thereafter. And I purchased them for the group, or the group, I had the group purchase it, you know, Warner Brothers. But it was a memory Moog Plus that had the built-in rudimentary sequencer in it. So we programmed it, and then I said to our tech guy, his name is Don Batts, give him a shout out because he was an innovator. And I said, how can we marry and lock up to the Linn LM1 drum machine at this time? He says, I don't know. Let me see what I can do. I'll figure it out somehow. I go, because this is a MIDI sequencer, but the LM1 doesn't have MIDI or the ability to lock to this. He modified the LM1 to work with MIDI sync.
Wow. That's pretty heavy duty.
Yeah, and so so the drummer was able to just hit play on there, and then the memory Moog was locked and ready with a cable, And that's how we did it, and we programmed it that way.
Wow.
Very, very early, rudimentary way of sequencing.
And that point, again, the LM1 you mentioned is a drum machine, when
Yes.
drum machines that sounded like real drums, because they
Yes.
used samples, were new.
Yes.
There were beatboxes before that went boom, tss, boom,
Yes.
tss, and
These were
that's
samples of some
real drums.
something, yeah. But
Yeah.
they still didn't quite sound real either. They were kind of like, what is that? You know.
Especially if you do what Prince did and tune them so
He'd
weird
tune 'em
and low.
lower.
They were
used-
made to tune
yeah.
up and down, but he would literally just modify it so it became his own unique samples.
Well, but that LM1 didn't come with the ability to tune. That was also
a mod.
a mod
Yeah.
on the later ones. They added that feature. So one of his great innovations was to lower the side stick sound, and it's very woody and thick, and had this thing.
It's on a million of those records. Yeah, for sure.
That was a very Prince.
And now there are sample
unique to his
libraries
sound
where they've
that
sampled
have
that
it.
sound, and you can buy them and do your tribute bands and so forth.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, is an interesting. I'm fascinated by weird tribute bands. Both the success of them, like, wow, they really do a great Fleetwood Mac. It's very uncanny, or Van Halen, or whatever. But then some fail miserably.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
not even the right guitar, or you're playing the song at the wrong tempo or something. Do you guys ever see tribute bands doing this kind of stuff?
Yeah, a few.
Must be weird.
Along the way, yeah.
That's my friend, but it's not. It's some Asian guy, and that's my other friend, and that's not. It's some farm worker dressed up as a bass player.
Right, yeah. I've seen it, yes.
Years ago, I met AC/DC, and I asked them, because Australia is the land of tribute bands. It's so far away that many people didn't tour there. So a huge scene of tribute bands grew up in Australia, and AC/DC, which is without a doubt the biggest band from Australia, was, of course, everybody had. And I said, do you guys ever watch and go see tribute bands about AC/DC?
I actually saw one.
You did?
Yeah, a few years ago.
Fun, good or bad?
They were great. They
Good.
were actually from Australia, and they were all
Oh.
female, and they were an AC/DC tribute group called Hell's Bells.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
The female tribute band thing has
Female.
exploded.
And even the one gal that was
Angus, yeah.
Angus does a whole part in the show where she exposes her behind.
Like he does.
Just like he does.
Yeah, it's the show.
And we were just like, whoa,
Wow.
And it says Hell's Bells.
on her butt.
Oh, that's great.
On one butt cheek and bells on the other butt cheek.
That is putting on a show.
Yeah.
That is good. Putting on a show.
Yeah.
And I ask those guys, do you ever go see tribute bands? And they go, we sneak in the back, and we're like, look at you. No,
Yeah.
look at you.
Yeah.
And they're making fun of the guys, like, look how you look like a dumb guy, and look how fat you are. And they're
Yeah.
they go have fun making fun of the AC/DC tribute bands. It's probably kind of weird, but probably kind of flattering that people are still doing this stuff all those years later because they love the music, of course.
Yeah. I've seen several Beatles groups like that.
It takes a certain level of talent just to get
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
but it's a little strange too.
You guys walked in on a tribute band at a casino that was playing Prince music.
Oh,
So it was a revolution standing in front of these guys. at a
Watching them
small
play.
stage at a casino, and they had no idea who was one slot machine in front of them.
wow.
Literally.
They may never know, right?
They never know.
But how weird, how cool. Although it's got to be a little strange, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if any of us in a normal workplace went in and there were different people pretending to be your office workers, it would be a weird thing, even if they looked sort of alike.
Yeah.
But their nose was bigger, or they were taller, or something.
Every Dr. Fink I ever saw doing a Prince thing, they were always very heavy for some reason. I don't know why they're like,
Ah.
I thought it was kind of interesting.
Do you have any critiques for Dr. Fink tribute people that you can help them out with their little
Yeah,
performance?
go on a diet.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. One guy had a speculum hanging instead of a you know what that is, right?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
a
of course.
gynecology
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. So one guy had that instead of a stethoscope
He's
dangling
hoping to
around
meet his
his neck.
future girlfriend
Yes.
that night at the show.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, John Goodman did a skit on Saturday Night Live in like 90 something, early 90s, where he dressed like me and he was the owner of his own rock and roll themed restaurant,
Oh, great.
where the waiters come out dressed like different rock stars and come to your table.
That's
He was
cool.
the owner though, and there was a guy doing Jim Morrison at the table, and he kept hitting on one of the guy's wife at the table, and they got really mad at him, and he out comes John Goodman and goes, "What's the problem?" And he's dressed in scrubs, and they go, "Who are you supposed to be?" "Well, I'm the doctor from Prince's group, but I'm the owner of the restaurant." So, we were watching this. We didn't know what was going to happen.
Wow.
Because I watched that show religiously, and I just was astounded that they brought me in as a character.
All you can say is imitation is the sincerest
It's
form of flattery.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a reference point that people know you. Among Prince's bandmates, and there are so many, but some serious musical talents all the way down the road, everybody, really, that you happened to grab something that was unique, and it did come out, and people know about it, the Revolution specifically. And when this reunion happened, there are people like myself, if there is a Queen show without Freddie Mercury, of course I would love to see Freddie Mercury, if possible. But if not possible, I'm a big fan of John Deacon, Brian May, Roger Taylor, whoever wants to be in that room, I will pay to go see them, and I'll see what their contribution was to the music. Those of us who are musicians understand that all the members of Led Zeppelin are important. All the members of Miles Davis's band were important. It's not just Miles Davis that was a genius. And so when I heard you guys were going to play together, I was like, this is my thing. I get to go see that version of it and appreciate it, which was very important for me.
Yeah.
I've been friends with Wendy and Liesl for a while, but I got invited to Wendy's birthday to see, and you guys, some people got together and played a few songs in a little room, and it was like, wow, there's that sound. And it's an acoustic piano and a little drum set. And
a Wurlitzer piano, too.
Yeah, and
Wendy,
a Whirly.
Lisa was on the Whirly, I'm on the acoustic.
And she's playing like the cello parts, and she's doing some of the string synth parts, but the feel was instantly there. It's hard to explain, but it's almost like a sandwich or a soup. When you have those ingredients together, it suddenly feels familiar. Mm-hmm. And there's no question that Prince had exceptional bass players every time out, every drummer, every keyboard player, every backup singer. They were all incredible people. But this group of characters from that certain period that became so well known has a flavor that I really love. And if anyone got a chance to watch Sheila E. put together this big tribute with all the performers and St. Vincent and Foo Fighters and everybody doing their thing, and then the Revolution comes out and closes it. If you watch Purple Rain and Bobby plays the drums, you're like, there's that exact thing that no one else can do. And when you guys play together, it makes me emotional thinking about it. It really has a special thing that you guys are like a family,
Yeah, very true. There was a wonderful chemistry there. And Prince was really great at, putting that cast of characters together, picking the people that he needed.
And those who were lucky enough to see the shows, and I hope there's more, I mean, honestly, there should be more coming, but Wendy does a very nice, a little different speech each night about, what it means to play without him, and that everybody wishes he was here, and he was so important and so unreplaceable, but also that we want to play this music with you and for you, and the audience is there for it for the right reasons. It's really, really cool.
What we did is we tried to bring back how the record sounded. We were we wanted to stay true to the original arrangements as much as possible, with some interesting transitions between songs, but we really wanted to do it that way. Because Prince would, on those those shows and throughout the 80s, he was always trying to change it up a lot.
There's medleys?
Yeah, he liked
longer versions?
Well, but he just liked to add new interludes and new things in the songs. We just wanted to just strip it back to the original stuff and use a little bit of some of the old transitions, but that was the main, way we wanted to do it. And we had a guy named Scotty Baldwin do our front of house, who worked for Prince the last 10 years or so that Prince was with us. So he knew the show inside and out and the music inside and out. So he was the logical choice to be our front of house guy.
I loved the set list the few times I saw things.
Yes.
It was interesting because it probably wouldn't be what he would pick, but you're picking it from a memory and a fan's point of view that actually these are pieces you wouldn't always hear live.
Yeah.
And I really like that. Really good. Were there things that didn't work out, or you tried to pick a few?
Yeah, there were a few things we did that the group ended up not doing live. I think we played Little Red Corvette, but it just didn't click for some reason. as well. And that's because, Des wasn't there. Des,
Yeah.
the original guitarist.
It's fun to see, and I'm really pushing for more to happen. I think once people saw that NBC special, that many people who didn't appreciate what the band was and what the band brings to things will appreciate it now.
Yeah.
It's out there being watched, and people appreciating it and seeing that you guys can sing. And Mark comes out, and he's like, wow, he's a great lead singer. He's a great frontman. And then Bobby plays those parts, and the feel is suddenly just perfect on all the records. He was in so long in the band.
Yeah.
As you were too.
Yeah.
He started a little bit earlier. And
Not
then,
much, though.
Yeah, but just a bit. And you lasted a little bit longer at the end part of things.
Yeah.
Those contributions are known but appreciated better when you can separate it from just an old film or something.
Yeah.
I want to get into about you, a dog person or cat person?
My first pet after moving out of my parents' house was a cat. Because I couldn't have dogs or cats because my brother and my mom were allergic to them. So my brother and I were roommates when I first moved out of the house. He'd already moved out, and then when I moved out, I wanted to see if he wanted to join me, and he said yeah. And then he got a stray cat, came out of some cemetery across the street, and he brought it in the house, and I went, what's that? He goes, it just came out of the cemetery. You want to keep it? I go, you sure it doesn't belong to anybody? And he goes, I don't think so. We'll let it run around and roam, and if it sticks around, we'll keep it, okay? And I go, okay. So we ended up with Cleo the cat. He named it Cleo. And then he was allergic to it, but he wanted to have a cat because he didn't have one ever growing up. He didn't care. He just started taking his allergy pills so he could deal with it. And then from there, when I got married, I wanted to have a dog. So I got my first dog with my wife, Andra. And the rest is history. I became a dog and cat person, which I have no preference. I like them both at the same time.
Most people definitely fall into one camp or the other, and then there's the bilingual people that love them both. It's rare.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
One of the things that is interesting about this studio, and you guys have been hanging out in my space here where we play old tapes and a lot of weird old technology from the past, but when I first moved in here, the first month, everything was going wrong in like the weirdest ways. Microphones turning off in the middle of a vocal take.
Interesting.
And then I would try everything else. No, it's the mic is broken. A simple microphone. We'd have to start again because, of course, you can't use the same mic. We have a new mic, different kind. And then we go back and the other mic works again. Things were really going weird, like lights turning off while the switch is on and stuff.
Sounds like a little poltergeist.
It sure did. And even my mother, who is very traditional and conservative, and she was like, sounds like something is up there. And she said, why don't you go? And so I got a South American shaman woman to come in here, did the rattles, and she goes, you can go to work. I'm just going to be in here chanting and doing rattles. And she said, there's an old woman around this neighborhood. She's not in your place, but she wanders, mischievous, doesn't like people, likes to cause problems. And I banned her from this place, and she won't be back. And we had no more problems.
Wow,
after that.
did she burn any sage too?
She did.
Oh,
sage
wow.
and rattles and some chanting.
I've had some experiences with that myself.
That's literally what I wanted to get into. I thought we're here to tell stories, and some of those stories to me are the most interesting because we don't really know why or what. You have a smile going on, like
the smirk.
Yeah, I'm
the
curious.
Ghost, it's the ghost smirk. Okay.
I'm real curious.
Okay. Well. Okay.
I'm going. No? Okay. It's good. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't like monsters.
Well, I hadn't really had any paranormal experiences really until later on in my life, and I'll just say some things entered in my early 30s.
It's my fault.
And it's probably my wife who had been having things ahead of time, and then she was having some experiences, and that came along with her. But so yeah, I experienced some very interesting paranormal moments.
Whoa.
Do you want me to go into detail?
I'd like to hear one story.
One story?
It's
Okay.
At least something that sounds...
So when we were first living together before we got married,
He didn't know really what was going on, because that's not some.
It's more your thing?
Well, no, it's just hard to date someone and say, "Oh, excuse me, but I grew up in a haunted farmhouse."
Wow.
And I have a friend.
Oh, I see.
that followed me around a
You
little.
can always see my friend. He actually saw my friend.
And I was half asleep and chased it out of the room. It woke me, and I ran it out of the room and woke up in midstream, literally in the bedroom, going, "What am I doing? There's something in here." You know, and I woke up.
What did you see?
I didn't see it, but I sensed it, and it was harassing her.
See, I woke up because it would paralyze me, and sat up, and I'm like, "Yes, get it, you know."
Wow.
Go get it.
You got your champion finally.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he's on his knees going, "What the?"
And one other incident in that same time frame from that one was probably 3 a.m.-ish in the morning.
Dead of winter.
Dead of winter.
Snow
on the ground, and where our bedroom is sort of an upper level, so someone to be difficult to do what happened, which was suddenly being woken by massive pounding on the wall behind our heads, on the outside wall of the house, like pounding.
And our bedroom is 2 floors up. So
Well, it's not 2. It was it just was a walkout, so it was second level.
Elevated.
The back where that
From the
wall
back.
was, it was 2 floors up from the ground. Snow on the ground, so nobody was.
There were no footprints out there or ladder marks the next morning when I went out to look, but it woke us up out of a sound sleep, and it kept pounding for about another 20, 30 seconds, and I'm just paralyzed, you know, scared out of my wits. She wakes up, I go, and then it stopped, and I said, "What the hell was that?" You know.
Wow. I think if I keep going, we're just going to rather have the ghost story podcast.
We also have the UFO stuff too.
Oh God.
I want to do a whole chat about those things next time when you're in LA. We got to do one. But
Yeah.
a couple things I want to touch on before we finish, maybe 3. You made a Beatles album.
Yes.
Most people don't know about it.
Yeah. Well, when I left the Prince fold, I began doing production work for the locally located or the label K-TEL Records.
Everyone knows K-TEL.
K-TEL, and they asked me to do a Beatles tribute. Hooked On. They had this whole Hooked On music series, and they asked me to do a Beatles record. So I agreed to do that, and yeah.
I have it around here somewhere. We'll get it.
Yeah.
We'll show it to people. And then also, there's this one. Party of the Millennium, which is a bunch of songs for when the year 2000 is coming. There's a Dr. Fink track called 1999, which is just you by yourself recreating the track.
You got to be kidding.
You don't remember it?
No.
Wow. It's an instrumental, but it's a sound alike. And it's just a short thing to introduce this compilation record.
Oh,
which is
I now remember doing it.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Wow. It was a quickie, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What I want to do at some point, because we're going to have a group of Patreon people, of course, following and helping us keep doing what we're doing, and I'll get you to sign it. We'll give away to one of those people, and I'll
Great.
find the Beatles thing and get you to do the same thing too. The last question is one of my most interesting ones. There's a huge video called When Doves Cry that came on MTV. Everybody saw it. It was the film. When MTV happened, the whole country listened to the same music. There's never been a time like that. There will never be another time like that. When your Bon Jovis and Guns N' Roses and Thompson Twins and whoever, and Prince became the same music that older, young, white, black, Asian, everybody heard the same music and listened to it. It was like a giant fire hose of millions of records. But When Doves Cry was that moment. There's this band on this soundstage, and they've got boots and brocade and lace and fluffy shirts and collars and cuffs, and everybody's done up great. And then there's one guy dressed like a freaking doctor in the back. And nobody thinks about it as being unusual because we're so used to you being you.
Yeah, because I'd been doing it years before.
And as controlling as he may have been about his band and their performances, and it's a split screen, very much like Those Who Know Song Remains the Same. That was the trick of that movie, where you divide in a symmetrical thing. But they chose not the side with the pretty girls on their side. They chose the guy with the doctor to be doubled up. And you get double time in the camera there. So it's pretty cool.
That's great.
I just thought it was a very interesting time, and one of those things that people don't really notice as incongruous and special, but it happened, and we're all used to it now. It's the way it should be.
And if you fast forward to the Parade album,
Yep.
for the Under the Cherry Moon movie soundtrack. Prince had us all dressed up in white paisley satin, and then I had something that was more of a pajama look at
Sort
that
of
point.
elaborate.
Yeah,
A
it's
little,
a whole
little
different,
elaborate.
complete departure from a doctor suit, really.
Yeah, and there's bright white sign of the times outfit, and there's some like
Yeah.
a little more.
But still, that was a Dr. Kildare look from the
more
60s with the
dressy.
high collar.
Beautiful.
And the button, which was my idea to do it at that time. I said I want to go even more retro back to look like that. And
You even moved to the other side of the stage, which is something most musicians don't do, is like
Exactly.
change sides. Anyways, thank you so much for being as part of our fun podcast. I like doing these things, and I like your rapport. You have so many good stories, and very appreciative.
it's my pleasure to be
Good.
here. Thank you.